Hey guys, welcome to day 4 of the 5-day first chapter challenge. I am Halie, your host, and as always, if you guys are just starting right here in the series, make sure that you go back and start on day 0 because that is where all of this begins. You can download the worksheets, and yeah, that is the best way to have a great time doing this and actually get to work on your first chapter instead of just watching me work on mine. Next up, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Obviously, gotta throw that in. And then today we're gonna be talking all about your opening lines. And this is an awesome topic because your first line has so much potential to reel your readers in and really hook them and get them reading your first chapter, which then hooks them in and gets them reading your entire book, which then gets them reading your whole series and everything you write for the rest of your life. So basically, it's important and I'm really excited to be talking about it today. And if you guys are ready to dive in, then go ahead and grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. All right, guys, so I have seen tons of advice surrounding opening lines in books. Everything from it's the most important thing ever, you have to get it right and perfect and amazing, all the way to it doesn't matter at all, literally nobody cares about your opening line. And then I would say most of us are probably somewhere in between those two extremes. I do think your opening line matters, but I do want to put out there that it is actually not your reader's first impression of your work. I do want you guys to think about this for a second because by the time they get to your opening line, they've already seen your cover. They've probably already seen your blurb. It's likely that they've already seen if you have a map in the beginning of your book, if you have like illustrations at the top of your chapters. They've actually already seen a lot of your process before they get to that opening line. And this is a little side note, but you guys will hear me say this a lot, is that the presentation of your book is actually very important because if they come into that opening line with the perception that you do really high quality work already, they are a lot of times inclined to view that first line favorably. And while of course it is important what you write in that first line, just know that it is not the end all be all. This is actually not your reader's first impression of your work. They've already seen a lot of other things first. So I hope that that takes at least a little bit of the pressure off. And I've also heard people say things like, I only read the first sentence of a book, and if I don't like it, I put the book down. I have actually heard this from readers on more than one occasion. But what I will say in response to that is that I don't actually think they mean the first line. I think what those very particular readers mean is actually more of the first thought. And this is what I want to present to you guys today, is that it's not actually the opening sentence quite as much as the opening thought, the opening moment of intrigue that you give to your reader, because that is what those opening lines are about. So you'll see that the title of this was actually opening lines, because very often a sentence is just half of a thought. And if you only read the first half of a thought, I really don't think you're being fair to that book whatsoever. So if a reader literally did only read that first sentence and it was half of a thought, it was incomplete, they really have done a disservice to themselves and to the book. And I think that most readers will at least give you the benefit of the first paragraph. I don't think anyone actually does a hard stop at the first sentence. So with that in mind, I want to look at your opening lines, your opening thought, and what that provides to the reader, because we want it to provide some sort of intrigue. That opening thought is almost like a promise to the reader that if they continue to read, it will come with a certain payoff. And to explain what I mean by this, I'm going to pull a couple of books off my shelf back here and read some of these first lines to you guys so we can examine the first lines, the type of intrigue that each of these authors is trying to give us, and what kind of promise they're giving the reader if the reader is to continue reading. So give me 1 second. Okay, so there is quite the stack here, but it's just the first lines. This is actually going to go pretty quick. And I've chosen these because they have a really good array of different opening lines. Yes, I did look through these before I did this video. So some of the examples of intrigue that we're going to see as we go through these are the author presenting a philosophical thought, a burning question, the emotion of absolute suspense within the first couple of lines. You can actually pull that off. And lastly, setting up some sort of reader expectation. So we're going to go through these and kind of break them down into those categories. Of course, not everything fits neatly into one category or another. It never does. By the way, this is a total side note, but I just saw it and I have to say something. Patrick Rothfuss signed this book for me. And guys, I've been signing books for years. This is like, I've signed so many thousands of books. But I had such a fangirl moment meeting Patrick Rothfuss. I got up to his table and was like, hello, I'm Halie. I just thought that was a funny story to share with you guys because Patrick Rothfuss is such an incredible writer and meeting him was just so cool to me. So it happens to all of us. I will just let you guys know. Let's see if I can even, maybe I should have bookmarked the first pages. Okay, so opening line for The Wise Man's Fear. Dawn was coming. The Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was a silence of 3 parts. That's your opening line for this. So this is what I'm putting in kind of the philosophical category. Now, it does, of course, go on to explain what the silence of 3 parts is, but Patrick Rothfuss has this amazing, magical ability to write philosophically and beautifully, but also it includes like so much action and just fun stuff. I, like I said, am an absolute fan, but that opening line gives that promise and sets that expectation because it opens with that pensive idea that it was a silence of 3 parts. You know, what an interesting way to look at something. And so that actually sets the reader expectation right from the get-go that this is the type of book that this is going to be. It's almost like a promise that if you keep reading, you're going to get more of this. And also it's intriguing. What is a silence of 3 parts? It does want to make you go on. Okay, the next one up is The Hunger Games. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. Okay, so this is going to be in that category of like suspense and a burning question. What is the reaping? That sounds terrible and scary, and it sets the tone for what the Hunger Games is, which I'm sure most of you guys know, but if not, it's terrible and scary. But it gives the reader intrigue in the form of suspense because they need to know what is the reaping, and they have that expectation now that this is going to be a book that's a little dark, a little scary. The next one is actually by our very own Colleen Mitchell. Colleen, I know you're watching this, so I did have to pull your book off because you have a great opening line, which is, Luke burst into the control room, his heart pounding louder than the combustion turbine's whine. Cold sweat coated his neck and forehead, despite the sweltering temperatures radiating from the engine room behind him. Again, starts with suspense and a burning question. And a lot of this book is that same tone of, okay, what is going on? Trying to figure out, okay, are the characters going to survive? This does a really good job of setting that reader expectation, giving us the promise that there's going to be more of this to come, and giving us that intrigue. It leaves us with that burning question of what's wrong? Why is this guy breaking into the control room in such a panic? And actually, I just want to throw in really quickly, this does a really good job of what we were working on yesterday, of combining some of those details that we need that set the scene, but doing it through action. When we say cold sweat coated his neck and forehead, despite the sweltering temperatures radiating from the engine room behind him. Guys, we can feel the temperature of the room around him and hear the whine of the combustion turbine, all while the story continued to move forward. So thanks, Colleen, I had to share that one. It was a really great opening line. Next up is Ender's Game, which, funny story, I did read through these books before I selected them as just kind of like a good mix of different kinds of intrigue we could use. And when I read Ender's Game, I didn't stop. That's how I think you know you had a really good opening line, is I'm now halfway through Ender's Game because it was just so compelling. Okay, so this one says, and it starts with dialogue, I've watched through his eyes, I've listened through his ears, and I tell you he's the one. Or at least as close as we're going to get. So again, this leaves you with actually several burning questions of what does it mean that he's the one, and how do you watch through somebody's eyes and listen through their ears? And what does this mean for this kid Ender? You know, it really does set the mood of suspense, and this is a suspense-filled book. It does a really good job, and as I said, I am halfway through it now. But I also want to use this actually as an example of, you know, we were just talking about how Colleen did a really good job of incorporating those details that set the scene into her opening, and I have seen a lot of different people in a lot of different places give the same advice about not opening your book with dialogue, which obviously Ender's Game just did. My take on this you guys, is that it is just a stylistic choice. There is no reason you cannot open with dialogue. What you want to understand is that you are giving up the ability to create imagery around the dialogue. Like, there is no context around it. It's the equivalent of, if this were a movie, it's like opening to a blank black screen with just one lone voice speaking, which is an absolutely valid way to open a movie. It is a stylistic choice. If that's the way you want to do it, I'm all for it. And you can just go ahead and ignore the people who tell you not to. All right, next up is Jim Butcher's Stormfront. This is the Dresden Files. Okay, opening line of this. I heard the mailman approach my office door half an hour earlier than usual. He didn't sound right. His footsteps fell more heavily, jauntily, and he whistled. A new guy. He whistled his way to my office door, then fell silent a moment. Then he laughed. And this is one of those ones, this is like, I don't even know if I would say suspenseful as much as a burning question. Like, why is this mailman standing outside of your door laughing? This is enough intrigue for me to be like, okay, I gotta figure out why the mailman is standing outside the door laughing. There's gotta be a reason, which I kind of want to spoil for you, but you know what? If you're interested enough, you can go ahead and read this. Next one up is, of course, we have to throw in an obligatory romance, which is Twice Loved, a family favorite. It had been 5 years, 1 month, and 2 days since Rye Dalton had seen his wife. In all that time, only the salty kiss of the sea had touched his lips. Only its cold, wet arms had caressed him. Guess what kind of book this is? I shouldn't have even told you it was a romance. Obviously, this is setting up the reader expectation. It is giving you the promise that this is gonna be lovey-dovey, gooey romance, and you know that from the get-go. Not only does this set up the intrigue of why has it been 5 years since Rye Dalton has seen his wife, but it definitely sets that reader expectation and gives the promise of what is to come further in the book. And then lastly, we're gonna read the opening line of Macho and the Great Dragon Escape. You wanna know why? Because I want to. This is not at all what we're working on. This is not a first chapter, but it is a first line. So I'm gonna go ahead and read it to you guys. And you know what? I'll show you the pictures too. Can you see that? You see that all right? Okay, perfect. It's with Macho and Archie our story begins, when a pup and his person became best of friends. And together they lived in a tower quite tall, where they chased and they wrestled and played fetch the ball. All right, reader expectation set. You know what to expect. The book's gonna rhyme. You're gonna have a good time. It's about a puppy having some adventures. There is no confusion whatsoever on what type of book you're getting here. So that is what is really important in your opening first lines, is setting some sort of intrigue, you guys, setting the reader expectation for what is going to come in the book, and not obsessing so much over the first sentence itself, but I want you to think much more deeply about your opening thought and why does it matter and how does it impact your reader. Okay, so the homework today is actually pretty simple. It is to describe what about your opening thought will be intriguing to your reader. It is to say what kinds of readers will and will not connect with this opening thought. Because remember, yesterday I talked about the example of describing somebody's depression in great detail. And with some readers who have been through that, who have experienced that themselves, that alone will invoke emotion in them. But it won't invoke emotion in everybody. And so I want you guys to think about, with the sort of intrigue that you're using, who is that going to reach? Because that opening line about the loving sea caressing Rye Dalton's lips is not going to reach everybody the same way. Not everybody is going to feel the same level of intrigue for that opening line. So I want you guys to really be deliberate about who you're reaching and making sure that lastly, this sets the tone for the book that your reader is looking for. Okay, because if they're looking for that romance, they know from that opening line that this is their kind of book. If they're looking for a shoot 'em up, they know that this is not their kind of book. But if you are writing a shoot 'em up, you want that opening line to be the right kind of intrigue, to pull the right reader in and keep them reading through chapter 1. So then the last thing I want you guys to do is just try writing out a couple of alternate openings, see how they go, see how you like them. You know what? If you end up sticking with the one that you had originally, totally fine. But you may find a new one as you're looking through your options that you like a little bit more. So I am gonna jump off. I don't even remember what my first line is for my next series, but I'm excited to go review it, see if there's some improvements that I can make. And lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you guys tomorrow for day 5 of the 5-day first chapter challenge.